Hey there, today we are going to talk about lookalike audiences and advanced lookalike audience strategies. So we're starting here in Ads Manager. We're going to click on the main menu in the upper left-hand corner, hover over All Tools if your menu doesn't fully extend, and then click on Audiences. Now from here, we are going to go in to create a new audience and then start building our lookalike audiences. So you can create a lookalike audience from a ton of different sources. Everything from your email list to pixel data to people who've engaged with your Facebook page or your Instagram business profile. So the first thing you need to figure out is what source audience do you want to use. I encourage you to think about the ads that you're running right now and what you want those people to do. Then kind of reverse engineer what that source audience should look like. So let's just assume you're running this ad because you want to build your email list. You want to generate leads. Well, the source audience you should be using here are the people who are already on your email list. Now, what if you're trying to sell a product? The source audience should be people who've already bought that product. So think about what source audience that you have that's already done the thing that you want your people to do when they see this ad. You can consider using that as your source audience here. You can click in here and select from your existing sources, or you can click on the Create New Source button and create a new custom audience, just like we talked about last week. Once you've selected the audience that you want to use for your source audience, then you're going to select your location. For this, you can choose only the United States if you're only targeting the US, or you can add multiple countries into this box. So if you're targeting the US and Canada, you can add both into the box, or you could create a separate audience for the United States and a separate audience for Canada, just as an example. There are pros and cons to using either option. It's totally your preference. I like separating them out because I may want to separate them in different ad sets, and I'd rather have the two clean audiences rather than targeting the lookalike and then geo-targeting down. But either way works. So select your audience locations, and then down here is where we're going to spend the most of our time discussing things today. Select audience size. The first thing you can choose is how many lookalike audiences you want to create. We're going to leave it at 1 for now and talk about what this grid means, and then we'll talk about why you may want to switch this. So this grid is 0 to 10, and it defaults to building a 1% audience. And the reason that's the default is that in most cases, this is what you want. So you want the 1% of the United States population on Facebook who are most like this source audience, because those are going to be the people that are most similar to the people that the people that have done the thing that you want these people to do, right? So in most cases, 1% is what you want. Now, I'm going to take a step back here and talk about our source audience size. You can build a lookalike audience off a source audience with as few as 100 people. However, I recommend that you have 1,000 people in your source audience before you build a lookalike. And the reason is pretty easy to understand. It's because you need a bigger sample size in order to ensure that your data is accurate. So if you have only 100 people, you could have 50 of those people that like dogs. That could be a coincidence, or it could be an important piece of information. One way of knowing whether that's important or not is to have a bigger source audience. So when you expand up to 1,000 people, maybe you have 800 of those people who like dogs. Now that's a hugely more significant ratio, and Facebook will be more likely to include dog ownership in one of those audience breakdowns. Does that make sense? So the bigger sample size, the better. 100 is the minimum. I recommend 1,000, but the bigger, the better. So down here, jumping back to size down here, the size of the audience. The 1% here, I always say 2.2 million. It does fluctuate a little bit just based on how many people create accounts or delete accounts and things like that. So today it happens to be 2.16 million people. We're going to round it up to 2.2 million to make things easy, right? So 2.2 million people, if we increase this to a 2%, that's just going to double, right? So it went from 2.2 to 4.4 using rounded numbers. It's not an exact science. When we get up to 10, you'll see that it's 10% of the population. So it's just that number, that 2.16 million turned into 21.6 million people. Decimal place just moved over 1 because we went from a 1 to a 10%. Now, in most cases, you will need only the 1% audience if you are targeting the entire country. So the reason why you might want to consider using a 10% audience would be if you are targeting a hyper-local area. So if you're only targeting within 50 miles of Phoenix, Arizona, or 50 miles of Tallahassee, or 50 miles of Vancouver, whatever it is, if you're targeting a small geographical area, then I recommend you start with a 10% because it's going to give you this bigger audience size to begin with. And then when you geo-target it down to only get that area surrounding your city, then you'll still have enough people in there to make it worthwhile. If you're leveraging a 1% lookalike with only 2 million people to start, and then you're trying to narrow it down from there to hit only people near Phoenix, it's going to be a really small audience size, and you're likely not going to be happy with your results. Right now, I have a client who has hyper-local sites all over the United States and 2 actually in Canada, and we're doing this strategy where we're targeting that 10% lookalike and then geo-targeting it down and finding a ton of great success with that. Now, as far as the number of the lookalike audiences here, I'm going to explain why you might want to use this. So with this, you can change it from anywhere from 1 to 6. So let's just go big, right? Let's hit that 6. And you see what it's done is it's created 6 audiences, and they're segmented every 1% up to a 6% audience. So when we create them this way, this is what those audiences are going to be named. They're down here. So a 1%, which is this segment, a 1 to 2%, which is this segment, a 2 to 3%, this segment, right? So just imagine those, there's in between these dots, there's 2.16 million people, and we're hitting all of those different segments. Now, here's how you would leverage that. You would start by targeting the 1%. So this segment of people here, this 2.2 million people, and serve them your ad. Maybe after 2 weeks or so, you notice that the costs are starting to rise. Then you can test this segment, the 1 to 2%, and see where their costs are coming in. Are they higher? They're probably going to be higher than the initial cost for the 1% audience, but are they higher than the initial or than the cost after 2 weeks? Right? Are they higher or lower than that? So once you start exhausting this audience, like they've seen your ad and the people who are going to act have acted and the people who are not going to act are not acting, then you can start moving up in these different segments to show your ad to different people until it gets to be too expensive, right? Then you can go back to the drawing board and work on switching out copy, switching out creative, switching out offers. But this is a way that you can jump from segment to segment to segment, finding other people who are similar to your source audience, but going in the order of most similar to least similar, because that's going to be least expensive to most expensive. Does that make sense? Another reason why you want to set them up this way, here, today, with 6 or however many you choose, as opposed to building them as you need them, is when you build them this way, today, all at once, it eliminates overlap. So you're going to be sure that when you build these 6 audiences, that somebody is not in more than one of them, right? So these 2.2 million people are unique from any other segment. However, if I built just a 1% right now, and then next week I come in and I build the 1 to 2%, here's the thing, the whole process of finding people, there may be some people who have become less similar and have moved, based on where the algorithms are placing them any given day. So you don't want to have that overlap. You want to build them out all at once so that you ensure that there's no overlap between any of those people. Now, once they're built, lookalike audiences, they will dynamically update, which means you don't have to go in and manually update them unless they are built off of a manually updated audience. So an email list is the only one that I can think of. I'm pretty sure it's the only one that is manually updated. So if you have an email list that you uploaded, you built a lookalike off of that list, and then later on you're going to add more people to that list, that's when I recommend you also build another lookalike audience or lookalike audiences and delete any other original lookalike audiences so that it can populate based on the new names on your list. For web traffic, for Instagram or Facebook engagement, for video views, all of those core audiences, those custom audiences, update dynamically, and then the lookalike audiences will update dynamically after the custom audiences update, so you won't have to go through this process with those. I hope that makes sense. I did talk about this topic this week on the podcast. So if you are a podcast listener, you can head over to your favorite podcasting app and search for FamilyPreneur and listen to today's episode on Facebook Lookalike Audiences. You can also head over to megbrunson.com/102 and read the show notes. And that's it. So thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Feel free to let me know any questions that you have. Of course, we would love a thumbs up on this video, and if you would subscribe to our channel for more great content as it relates to being a familypreneur. We cover marketing on Mondays. We have a midweek mastermind every Wednesday on the podcast where we interview parent and children entrepreneurs and talk about how they balance it all. And then on Friday, I share reflections on the blog and podcast as they're related to marketing, entrepreneurship, and raising entrepreneurial kids. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon. Bye.